video cut out before it was supposed to cut out, so apologies for that. So just carry on from where we were talking about before. We're talking about the equipment, in my opinion, that worked, and the things that you probably should take, definitely take, and the things to be aware of when you're planning a trip. And again, I direct this at those who are considering doing the Nullarbor trip. The Nullarbor is an unusual place. It's a long way, of course, and it's not punctuated by any town, so there's no question of getting bike repairs or additional outdoors camping equipment or spare parts or tools or whatever else. That is a total no-no. So you're totally self-reliant. The only service available in that sort of really $2,000 kilometre, 2,500 kilometre leg is pretty much fuel and fried food, essentially. Sejuna is one offering towards the end of the Nullarbor, but that's towards the end of the Nullarbor. That's a small town where you get some facilities like that, but west of that there is zero. So we spoke about the bike and spoke about the research, spoke about the meteorology. I think one of the essential preparations you've really got to consider is the psychological preparation of a journey like that. You are going to be by yourself, and you are going to have some really tough days no matter who you are or what sort of equipment you've got or what sort of bike you've got. So you can prepare yourself physically and athletically, but I think there's a real need to prepare yourself psychologically. So what I've traditionally done in those kind of events for marathon conditioning or long bike trips or whatever else is to spend some time by yourself and pick some training dates over weeks and months and go out on a hard exercise one day or an overnight and beat yourself up. So go somewhere where it is difficult, where you are gonna, go into the sort of deep end, if you like, and just expose yourself to some long hours in the heat or in the cold, preferably overnight, and just find out what goes on with yourself psychologically. Because unless you simulate it in some way and prepare for it and cater for it, if it comes as a shock when you get out there, you might not like what you sort of see. So you can train for that, just to go out on some hot days, go and spend 5 or 6 hours in the hills, or if it's winter, go and get cold somewhere, and so you can sit back that night and have a sense of really what's going to happen. And also, of course, it gives you a great test of what equipment that you're currently using. So you're sure to fine-tune that after such a day. But you've got to get that psychological conditioning so you don't melt out there, both physically and mentally. In terms of equipment, it's got to work. And I spoke before about layering. The weather out there can go from freezing cold to normal to quite warm, back to freezing cold, all within sort of 45 minutes. So you really have to be in a position where you can lay your clothes. You may have seen those videos on I've got those curved straight bars on my 26-inch frame, and I've intentionally got those profile horns. So those aero horns I use in training when I'm not laden with equipment, and I do use them in aero position when I'm training. But when you're fully kitted up with front and rear panniers and a lot of equipment, it's too insecure to get down arrows, and you're not in that frame one, that you want to get down on arrows for an extra 2Ks or something. But I keep them on there, and I would suggest anyone doing a trip put those horns on there, because of what they're so good for is to, I don't have one in front of me, but to hang all your headgear on. Oh, you saw I had so many, buffs and beanies and neck gear and whatever else, because you're forever changing. So I rotated, I think 3 or 4 buffs. So some nights it would be so cold you'd have one, then one over the top, and then when you're climbing, even at night, you get too hot, so you'd peel one off, and you might want to put another one on your neck. You might have 3 on your neck. So all the time you're making these subtle changes to make yourself a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler. If you go heavy duty with one thing, like a really heavy duty hat, you take it off, you're freezing cold, you put it on, you're too hot. So you've got to be in a position where you can make these minute changes. And I just love these things. I know all cyclists know about them, but I took two pairs of these arm warmers. And during a day, I'd probably have these on and off 5 to 7 times. Certainly no matter what, at 4:30 they would go on as standard night gear. At least one pair of them would go on, and of course these are leg warmers, which are just brilliant. You know, with the zips down the bottom. I mean, you wouldn't even consider going to Nullarbor without something like this, because they go on and go off so easily, and they really work. One concern I did have out in the Nullarbor was not so much, especially not so much athletically or psychologically, that I couldn't get it done. I was confident that I'd get it done in those regards, but I did have a concern about, you know, a breakage on the bike I could deal with, but if the cold gets to you, it could really disable you. So that did worry me. So, you know, if you stop somewhere and you're freezing cold, it could really just stop you in your tracks. Even when you're in your tent at night out there, if you're bush camping, it could get so cold that you could be in you know, a spot of bother. So all these kind of things are essential to avoid that happening. The same with these booties that go over your boots. That as we all know, they don't do a great job of keeping really moisture getting through onto your cycling shoes, but they do keep you cold, and at night that's a really essential bit of kit. Other things I really used every single day. I used a Leatherman. You know, we've all got these or seen these multi-tool things, which I used every tool of that Leatherman on this trip. I used every tool of it, cutters and blades and Phillips head and plain screwdrivers and files and whatever else. That was a really essential piece of kit. The one piece of advice I'd give to people, and I've had a fair bit of experience with these things, don't buy a cheap one. Don't buy, you know, a copycat lookalike thing that you can buy overseas at the markets or something. They look impressive, but the day you need this thing to cut something, or like today when I was taking that bike apart to box it, I had to cut some shifter cable, 2mm shifter cable. Now the blades on these things are very, very sharp and they're very, very strong. They cut it very, you know, decisively. But if this was a copycat thing, it probably wouldn't cut it. So if you're in the field, like in the desert, and you needed to cut something like a stainless steel cable or whatever else, a rubbish tool would not work. You need a high quality, reliable tool. That's an essential piece of kit, and I wouldn't go anywhere without it. The same goes with these bike tools. I mean, you can buy these little bike tools that we all know, and they almost, you know, give them away at markets and things. They're small little things, they're getting smaller and smaller. But a lot of them are also a rubbish, because if they're not made of quality, like this is a Lazine stainless steel one. If it's not made of really strong material, they'll just break or bend. Now this has also got some Torx keys in there as well. So I would really urge you. This could really save the day if you need to use one of these things. You cannot afford for it to bend or break. And not only that, but you've got to have the range. You've got to make sure that everything on your bike, every nut, every Allen key, every Torx or whatever you've got on your machine, you've got to have the tool to fit it. I mean, for example, you know, tightening a pedal. If the turtle comes up, you've got to have the equipment to deal with it, and also a chain breaker. It's got a chain breaking device to get pins in and out of chain. Essential bit of gear. You bend a chain, or you bend a hanger on a derailleur or something, and you've got to break a chain and put a new link in. You need something that's of quality. That's a very good piece of equipment. The other thing I've been using for years on bikes, which I read about in a cycling journal years ago, and I use on every adventure I go to, is rubber bands. Rubber bands of all different sizes and colours. You'd just be amazed how useful they are. I tie half a dozen or so on the horns of my bike, and I use them again every day for you know, keeping food on there, or for keeping buffs on there, or scarves or towels, or holding some equipment on there, or a jumper or a jacket, or, you know, something. Really, really good things to have. A range of these things, these are by that great brand Cedar Summit. These compression bags, watertight, really excellent stuff. If you've got something like a sleeping bag I had all my night gear isolated. I didn't have any civilian kind of clothes on board. All I had was night gear like thermals, etc. And they were isolated, so they couldn't get any moisture. If you're in the desert, it's freezing cold, and you need to get those gear at night. You can't afford them to be moist anyway. So these kind of compression bags are just obviously the go. As I keep saying, I used to start the day with 5 layers of clothing on, and when I'd get into my tent at night, if I was free camping, which I did, the first night I free camped was out on the Bight, on the cliffs in the Australian Bight, and it's the coldest night I probably ever had in my tent. So the tent stood up to it, but during the night it gets so cold that you get the dew over the tent and it gets freezing cold. So you really have to have, again, a lot of layers. You can't just have one pair of thermal pants, because you'll just freeze to death out there. So this looks ridiculous and looks like a bank robber. And when I bought this, I had a bit of a laugh to myself. But this bank robber balaclava I took, and what a great piece of equipment it was. So I'd wear this to bed every night in the tent, underneath a couple of buffs underneath as well, with 2 or 3 things on the top. A really inexpensive, very useful piece of equipment. Yeah, I said before, like every cyclist, well, especially at night. So at night I'd go into my night mode, where I'd put the strobe lights on at the back, the very powerful headlight. All my panniers have got high-vis strips all over them. My tyres have high-vis rings on them, the Schwalbe Supreme, Marathon Supremes, and over the top of everything else I put this jacket with the high-vis things on it. So I was very well lit up at night. But that's a different piece of gear than what I said before. This is just the vest that you pick up at any cycling shop with a little Velcro tab that sticks together. But the other one I'd wear during the day, and this is such a useful thing because it's got a zip on it, and again it's another useful layer that's very light, very compact to put away, and it's got a zip on it. Obviously, wet weather gear essential. High vis plastic, and they're quality pants. They're not just sort of rubbish ones. That's a real trick. If you go into an adventure shop and you want wet weather pants or wet weather jacket, and they'll sell you a waterproof jacket. There's no such thing as a waterproof jacket or waterproof pants. It's almost a non-existent product. Really, nothing is waterproof. So those inexpensive jackets you see in the shops, if you stand out in the rain in a paddock for 20 minutes, half an hour, you're wet. So you've really got to optimise, your budget and think very clearly about the jacket, the rain jacket you're going to put on top. Do not buy a rubbish one. I bought a good one a long time ago, and then also I treated it a bit obsessionally, but I treated it with 2 or 3 times with that. You can soak it in a repellent silicone kind of product, and you soak it, dry it. So it was good to start off with, and I soaked it in this product. So when it was in the field and tested, and it was only tested on that one day coming in here, the other day when I rescued that sheep, it stood the time. I thought, well, how will this jacket go? And it went very well. So don't compromise on a jacket.